Hey there guys, I'm SonicGhost and welcome to a bonus episode of Let's Play Banjo-Tooie. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at all the different things that have changed in Banjo-Tooie now that we have defeated Grunty once again. So without any further ado, let's just go ahead and jump straight into our file here and see what has changed now in the world of Banjo-Tooie. So for starters, if you haven't collected all the jiggies or all the extra collectibles in this game, like the notes, Jinjos, maybe extra moves, you can still explore all your previous worlds and do cleanup at this point. So you don't have to worry about being locked out of any specific areas if you have missed something. But here in Jinjo Village, King Jingling has been revived, so now we can actually go back into his throne room and we can talk to him. We haven't talked to him since the very beginning of our journey, so let's see what he has to say now. Welcome back. Are you feeling better now, Mr. Ringling? Couldn't be better. Thanks. Hey, that Mrs. B is a wizard cook. Those scones at the party were top-notch. We wouldn't know. You and Greedy Klungo ate them all before we can get there. Sorry. It's all quiet in Jinjo Village. I think you can go home. Yeah, King, sing along until your people need saving for a third time. Sing along, ring-a-ling, ding-a-ling. Come on, guys, please remember my name. I'm the one and only King Jingling. Yeah, you're gonna be everything but that to us. I'm sorry. Banjo-Kazooie don't really care for you all too much, bud. So you're just gonna have to deal with it, sadly. Now, one interesting thing to note here is Bottle's house. We can't actually enter it anymore, because as you can see, the front door is shut. So we can't get in through the front at all, and there's no way to open this door. You can't bash it down, you can't use grenade eggs. This door is just permanently locked. And the same goes for the back entrance too. If you try to enter Bottle's house here through the back entrance back in the Wooded Hollows, you'll be greeted with a locked gate here. So this is the same locked gate that was in Bottle's house in the very beginning of our adventure that King Jingling opened. Now that he's revived and you defeated Grunty, there's no reason for you to come into Bottle's house, so now they shut it up. Interesting enough though, if you can find a way to glitch yourself inside of this house or use cheat codes to enter in here, nothing really has changed inside of Bottle's house, which is a very interesting note. Because remember, we've saved Bottles at this point, and he is revived, so he's supposed to be back at home now with his family. But if you manage to get into this house after you defeated Grunty when it's locked up, nothing here has changed in a way that reflects on Bottles returning, so everyone thinks he's still gone, and he will never come home at this rate. This is a very interesting thing to note. You can talk to pretty much everyone in this house except one of the kids, as for some reason you just cannot talk to this one kid here. I'm not sure why, but he doesn't have anything to say, so yeah, this is just a very interesting thing to note. Not very something you're supposed to see normally, but it's something I wanted to go ahead and point out. So here in Cauldron Keep, probably some of the bigger changes has happened, as now that we have defeated Grunty and all of her sisters are dead at this point, there's really no one here. In fact, you can enter the Tower of Tragedy quiz room here, and you can see all the 1-ton weights still crushing the podiums here. So, presumably, the bodies of Grunty's sisters are under these weights, and they're just going to stay here for all eternity. So, Grunty was trapped under a rock in the first game, and now her sisters are trapped below 1-ton weights in the sequel. How an ironic fate. If we enter the gun chamber here, nothing really has changed in this area. You can still taunt the ding pod, he can still refill your eggs and such, but he doesn't really say anything new. But the real thing I wanted to show off in this area that has changed, on the other hand, is if we go to the very top of Cauldron Keep, where we fought Grunty, you're gonna notice one major thing that's changed now. As you can see, we have a different cutscene playing where we enter the top of this area, and there's nothing up here. Since we beat Grunty and destroyed the Hag 1, we don't see Grunty up here at all. We don't see the machine, any of her grunts, nothing. This whole area is just empty. So, there's nothing you really do up here, and you would think, well, I'm up here now. Now what? Am I just stuck? Luckily, the developers thought of this. You can head back over to the elevator you came into this area on, and you can just press the B button to ride it back down. So that's pretty much everything that has changed in the world of Banjo-Tooie. But there is one more thing I want to go ahead and take a look at in this video, and this is actually a pretty big deal. This is a piece of leftover content that is in Banjo-Tooie called Bottle's Revenge. Ha ha ha! Finally, I'm free! Oh. Free from where? From Dead Boy down there. I am Bottle's evil spirit. You don't look very evil. Yeah, you look like a nice ghost. Oh dear. Just how evil are you? Evil enough. I'm going to follow you around and use my sinister abilities to possess weak-minded creatures as you play. Cool. Isn't it just? Anyway, I will automatically possess the nearest creature to you. But why would you want to do that? Simple. It will allow a friend to control the creature using the second controller to try and hinder your progress. You feed the school! I am, aren't I? Player 2 should look out for the magic sparkles when a creature that I can possess is within range. Sparkles? Yes. White sparkles indicate the next creature that will be controllable when R is pressed. I'm sure that's all very nice. Come on, Kazooie. Let's ignore this silly spirit and get on with our quest. So this here is Bottle's Revenge, a mode that was planned to be in Banjo-Tooie, but sadly was scrapped near the end of development because this wasn't fully bug tested yet. So because of this, you can't play this normally in Banjo-Tooie, but it is still in the game code. So if you have something like a Gameshark device, you can go ahead and use cheat codes to put this mode back in Banjo-Tooie. So how this mode works is that Bottle's Spirit will possess any enemies around Banjo-Kazooie. So player 2 can go ahead and possess any enemy in the game to hinder Banjo-Kazooie's progress. Anytime you see sparkles over an enemy, you press the R button as player 2, and Bottle's Spirit will swap over to that said enemy. You can go ahead and walk around, you can press the attack button to go ahead and attack with that said enemy. And any enemy within range of Bottle's Spirit, if he is not possessing something already, he will go ahead and take over. Another thing to mention is down in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, there is a radar, so this shows you what enemies are around you and what enemies you are possessing. So the red dot is Bottle's Spirit, and then the white dots are the enemies you can go ahead and possess. The radar, in my honest opinion, isn't really that helpful, but it does tell you how many enemies are surrounding you can go ahead and possess if the camera isn't focused on them. One thing to mention about this mode is that there are some limitations. For example, enemies cannot go through loading zones, so they get stopped on an invisible wall. Another thing to mention is that boss fights, Bottles cannot come in whatsoever here. So when you enter a boss arena, he'll just say, "Don't think I'm needed here. See you later." And then he will just leave. So sadly, Bottles cannot control any of the boss fights in Banjo-Tooie, but this makes sense as pretty much every boss in Banjo-Tooie is very scripted out with their attacks. So to get Bottles working in a two-player sense with boss fights would take a lot of extra work, and they did not get to that part in this development, sadly. So you can really just use Bottles to only control the minor enemies here in Banjo-Tooie. Now, an interesting thing about this is that player 2 does not have any camera control, but whenever Bottles snaps to an enemy so player 2 can control them, the camera will kind of pan back to the enemy. So it tries to keep the enemy on screen for as long as it can, but when Banjo-Kazooie are out of reach, then the camera will snap back over to Banjo-Kazooie. Now there are certain cutscenes and areas that Bottles cannot enter, like the cutscene about King Jingling, he just disappears entirely, and entering the zombified throne room, Bottles will also disappear here too. So that is something to note, certain cutscenes and areas Bottles just cannot enter at all, but he can be used with Mumbo and the transformations here in Banjo-Tooie. So here, talking to Mumbo, Bottles will be with us basically the entire time until we have control of Mumbo, and then he will shift over from haunting Banjo-Kazooie to haunting Mumbo now. So this is an interesting thing that you can go ahead and do, as you wouldn't think you'd be able to still use Baldur's Revenge with characters like Mumbo or Hubba, because these characters give you certain types of transformations or things to interact with that wouldn't make it possible to use bottles. But in a case like Mumbo here in the first world of the game, Mayhem Temple, we can go ahead and take control of the golden statue here, and bottles will go ahead and start haunting the statue now. So you can control enemies while player 1 is playing with the golden statue. This is a cool thing to note, but it doesn't really help player 2 in any sense because the statue is invincible. So player 2 can't really do much to hinder player 1's progress here. So, for example of this, we have an enemy just kind of attacking the statue's shins, and it just does no damage at all because the golden statue doesn't have a health meter. So you can just push him around, but that's basically all you can do. Now, bottles can also follow you into the first-person sections here in Banjo-Tooie, but the first-person sections are probably the worst areas for bottles' spirit to really interact with, because player 1 has full camera control here, and with how these sections in the game work in general, it's going to be next to impossible for player 2 to see what they're doing if player 1 does not focus the camera on an enemy. So these sections are a lot harder for player 2 to control, if you want to be honest. Here we're going to go ahead and transform into the first transformation here in Banjo-Tooie, a Stony, because we're going to go ahead and play in the Mayhem Kickball tournament here to showcase that Baldur's Revenge works in mini games as well. It's not just the standard gameplay in Banjo-Tooie. So here, we can go ahead and take control of one of the Stonies here, and now we can use this Stony to either help or hinder Banjo-Kazooie in this minigame, which is a very interesting thing you can go ahead and do. One thing to note though about this is that the Stonies are very slow, so player 2 isn't going to be able to move around that fast. So player 2 may have a little bit of a harder time trying to troll player 1 in this regard, so it may be better off if you both work out some kind of agreement and try to beat this game together instead of hinder player 1's progress. And because of this, Baldur's Revenge makes the minigames in Banjo-Tooie a lot easier. If you can use Baldur's Revenge in a minigame, you can go ahead and make this so much easier for Banjo and Kazooie that the games themselves can just kind of be a freebie. So an example of this is now going into Witchy World here, the Dodgem Dome. For the one-on-one Dodgem challenge, normally you have to worry about this one enemy getting in your way collecting the Twinklies, but since he's the only enemy here you have to worry about, and Bottles can go ahead and control this enemy, player 2 could either make this game really easy for you or really difficult. This really just depends on what kind of player you're playing with in Baldur's Revenge. So, as player 2, you can go ahead and maybe say trap Banjo and Kazooie into a corner so they can't really do anything, or you can be a helpful player and just don't really do anything or drive around the arena away from the Twinklies, making this so much easier for Banjo and Kazooie. This game already in the main game is a pretty easy minigame for you to complete, but with Baldur's Revenge, this is even easier for you to complete now, so this is a very interesting thing you can do, and it's very, very strange that you can't control enemies in the minigames for this reason, because this really doesn't hinder your progress as much. In fact, it helps it. But not all minigames you can technically use bottles with, so if you thought Canary Mary could get easier with Baldur's Revenge, you cannot control Canary Mary here, so get ready to still mash like crazy. One thing to note about the enemies here is that they can't pick up any collectibles here in Banjo-Tooie. So here we have an enemy just kind of rubbing against this Jiggy. They can't really do anything at all. They can still hurt Banjo while they collect the Jiggy, but that's pretty much all they can really do. But with how the Minjo system in this game works, Baldur's Revenge can actually make it easier for you to figure out what's a Minjo and what's a Jinjo. So in this case, we have a real Jinjo next to a Minjo, and Bottles immediately took control of the Minjo. Now the Minjo can't collect the real Jinjo, but as player 2, you can just kind of get the Minjo out of the way, or maybe just attack Banjo if you want to be a trolley player, but with Baldur's Revenge, this makes it even easier now for you to figure out what's a real Jinjo and what's a fake. But that's everything I wanted to go ahead and take a look at here with Baldur's Revenge. Overall, this is a very interesting mode in the game that was sadly scrapped for the final release of Banjo-Tooie. As I mentioned earlier, this mode is still on the cartridge of Banjo-Tooie, so if you have access to a Gameshark, you can go ahead and activate the Ball's Revenge mode and play through the entire game with this mode turned on. Originally, how this mode was supposed to work is that you were supposed to have player 1 and player 2 interchange who they would play as, so when player 1 would die, player 2 would control a Banjo-Kazooie, and then player 1 would control a Bottlenecks. This is not the case with the version of Ball's Revenge we have in the final version of Banjo-Tooie here, so if you want to change your roles, you're going to have to pass the controllers around, because that's the only way player 1 and player 2 can interchange their roles here as Banjo-Kazooie or Bottles. But that's everything to mention here about this mode, and everything I wanted to go ahead and talk about here in this bonus episode. So now with that all said, thank you guys for watching this, and I'll see you guys next time.